I'm Maureen Heffernan from School Committee.
I'm Tina Zorzis with the School Committee.
Linda Lukowski, School Committee.
Dina Sullivan, School Committee.
Joe Perry, Vice Chairman of the Rowley Board of Selectmen.
Larry White, Chairman of the Finance Committee for Rowley.
Always School Committee.
Dan Valianti, School Committee.
Ronnie Ray Parrott, Salisbury Selectman.
She's actually the chairperson. Freeman Condon, Salisbury Selectman.
Kim Croto, Assistant Superintendent.
Michelle Cresta, School Business Administrator, Triton.
Brian Forget, Superintendent, Triton.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. We'll do a quick Pledge of Allegiance if we could. The flag is right there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we jump in, we have meeting notes from the last meeting on March 22nd. Just want to make note that that's in the packet, if anyone missed that. And we're going to jump straight into the landlord-tenant working group. I'm going to let the superintendent take over at this point.
Thank you, Narissa. So this is the first time that we are looking at this as a full district communications committee. I believe it's now 2 years ago. This group decided to have a working group wanted to talk about alternative assessments, and landlord-tenant agreed. The first nut to crack was landlord-tenant. We believe we could have done that. So we did. There was a working group, Joe Perry representing Rowley, Tracy Blaze and Larry Gay representing Newbury, and Neil Harrington representing Salisbury. So we worked over the course of the year, Michelle and I, with them, and have the documents before you that you're looking at now. So just to set some context, the landlord-tenant is a description that we used. There's no necessarily a landlord-tenant document. This has kind of taken on a life of its own since we started talking about landlord-tenant. So what we would be doing is amending the regional agreement. We agreed, I believe it was spring of 16 last time, or was it spring of 17, that we made changes to the regional agreement and substantively agreed those around this table, mostly semantic, some minor changes, with these two outliers as the big ticket items to address. So what you have before you is a fairly small change to what would be included in the regional agreement, and without reading it to you, what it in essence does is it treats the three elementary schools the same. Currently, the town of Rowley owns Pine Grove, the town of Newbury owns NES, and the district owns Salisbury Elementary. As of fiscal 20, as of fiscal 20, that school is paid off. The last payment by the town of Salisbury is fiscal 19. At that point, the title can be transferred because the debt is in the district's name, even though the town is paying the assessment as a pass-through. We can then transfer the ownership of that building back to the town of Salisbury since it's then paid off. So there's some details that we have spoken about as a committee in regards to making sure that there aren't any long-term capital known needs that we're passing back unfairly to the town. And we had our facilities director reaching out to the DPW director in Salisbury, and that communication is ongoing. But what this does is basically says at the middle school and high school, at the bottom of the page there, basically says what we've been doing, we're going to continue doing. But then elementary schools, other than noting the fact that the ownership would change effective July 1st of 2020, it implements a building lease. And the reason for having a lease is that, as we know, and if you talk to any of the 53 academic regions across this state, it is no small task to get a regional agreement amended. was reading in the newspaper today, Cape Cod Times, Dennis Yarmouth, they've been trying for 7 years, 8 years. We're now into our 7th year. So it certainly, this is not an easy task to do, obviously. So by doing this, the amendment, the language amended in the regional agreement is fairly simple, and it puts the relationship of the buildings that the town owns and the district owns, being the elementary schools, into a lease arrangement. That lease arrangement is signed off between the chair of the school committee and the chair of each board of selectmen of the town of the school. So that's an action that you agree as selectmen and school committee members, rather than having the requirement that the agreement goes back to the selectmen, then back to the town meeting, then on to the commissioner at the state. So as far as the small working group, I see Joe's the only one here tonight that was part of that group besides Michelle and I. But around the table, everyone had believed that made sense. We used the model from Pentucket. Actually, Tracy Blaze, when she was in West Newbury, did bring this model over, and it's what's used at Pentucket. So I'm certainly not going to read through it. Before we would bring this to a town meeting floor, there would certainly be my recommendation, and we would have our district council, and I would suggest each of the town councils review this in greater detail. There's been some pretty cursory review to speak about things like we need to put in definitions and things like that. So there has been some brief review, but a more thorough and detailed review. But in substance, we believe that this is the best way to move forward. It documents those costs. If you look on page 2 of 8 and 3 of 8. That really is the substance and the meat of the lease, denoting what is the district responsibility and what is the town responsibility. So if you see under district, it's all the minor repairs, day-to-day costs, preventative maintenance, utility costs, trash, snow removal, pest control, grounds maintenance, broken glass, bulbs, and ensuring the contents. So currently, we insure the building and the contents in Salisbury, just the contents in Pine Grove and Newbury. So again, that goes to we're the tenant. So everything in the walls, we want to change colors of walls. That's the tenant. That's our responsibility. All the major repairs, as noted below, snow removal on the driveways and parking lots, insuring the building, and then as you see, I think it was actually Rowley's council who suggested the definitions of the bottom of page 2 onto the top of page 3. What is a minor repair, a major repair, utility costs and such. So there is, you can see there it says, put the glasses on, without limiting the generality of the foregoing, preventative maintenance shall include the following. We have to determine that list. There is still, I don't think there's a lot of debate about that, but that we have to just tease out what exactly preventative maintenance means. So we felt like this was a document that we've had in place for quite a while now, trying to get it. Obviously, we've been busy with a few other things, but certainly this was something that we feel like is in a form that we want to bring to this group and make sure that we're still on track. And if this group believes that this is something, and the selectmen believe, I know the committee believes this, but if the selectmen believe that this is a way to move forward, we could add this to the list of things we've tentatively agreed as far as a regional agreement amendment. And then that last nut to crack that we've talked about is in a regional assessment review, which I know we want to talk about tonight. So any questions?
Just a comment.
Further
that,
to add, yeah.
I did bring it back, and I did ask Town Council Tom Mullen to review the document, and we're fairly well in agreement with what has been presented.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe, have you discussed with the board at all on this, just to make sure that we're not going to hit a pothole later on? Just to make sure that they're in agreement with general idea, or do you feel like it's...
I'm not sure whether we took an actual vote, but I think we're pretty much in agreement. I will ask the board to vote.
All right, perfect. I just want to make sure that as we're going through this,
I think it's, yeah, we had, as I said, Tom did take a look at it, and I'm pretty sure everybody's pretty much in agreement with that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I was going to say, if I could just say, so just to confirm, so for Newbury and Rowley, as Joe was saying, there really isn't a huge change. So there's certainly language that we're codifying, and I think that's good for everyone, so there's no more debate. But the real change is for Salisbury in regards to taking possession of a building that's 121,000 square foot facility in great shape, but still taking possession of a 121,000 square foot facility. So, so I think the biggest change is for Salisbury. And then I think coming away from this, whether it's an official vote or at least a discussion with the Board of Selectmen in each town to say, yes, let's put that on the tentative list for now. And then this would all become part of the approval of the full package regional agreement to say, here's what it is now. Hopefully we have one more thing we can iron out in months, not years. But so this wouldn't be a formal vote doing anything other than adding it to the tentative list.
Ronnie, I know you just took over his chair, so I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot on this. Do you know if there's been a review or what the?
There has not been a review yet, so
Okay.
that's what Freeman and I were just discussing. So Neil, because Neil kind of took control of this, he.
Yep.
So what I would say is this would be for the selectmen to speak with Neil and then put it on a vote for one of our board meetings in the up and coming months or so. But first checking in with Neil. I mean, everything I've heard so far from Neil is he was part of that process.
I was
so
gonna say, yeah.
don't see that there'd be any problem with it.
Yep.
It's just a matter of us taking a vote.
Yep.
Okay. And I don't want to, we don't have Newbury here tonight. I'd love to know what kind of where they're at. Do you have a sense as of the last time that this group met, at least with those representatives?
So Tracy Blaze, Town Administrator, and Larry Gay from the Finance Committee was part of this. Very much in agreement. Again, it's not a significant change for them. So this was something Tracy was familiar, so it was more getting everyone in line and really codifying what we've been doing, similar for Newbury and Rowley, and just then changing that. And honestly, there's not a huge change in the way that we function even with Salisbury Elementary School. We haven't had that major repair of $100,000, $200,000 where we've had to test that we don't have a definition. Now, 2018, 20 years after 2019, we're getting to that time when we want that codified because the building, like I said, is in great shape, but we want that clarified before we get to any further in the age of the building, so.
So since this seems fairly settled, I would love next DCC meeting if we could maybe feel like we have at least a moving forward. Do you feel like we can go back to boards of selectmen and get, I mean, doesn't have to be anything official, but just yes, we're going to set this aside. We feel like it's in a good place. Let's move on to other things.
That would be my feeling.
Okay.
I'd be willing to take
Yes.
it back to the board.
And I can talk to Neil when we
Okay.
set our next agenda.
All right. Perfect. And I don't want to put Brian out there, but I'm sure that he could update if there was any need for him to come in and talk about this and the reason behind it. and
Absolutely.
all
Yep.
that type of thing that he would. I'll just volunteer you. Here,
Big
there,
fan
no
of
more.
talking. Big fan of talking. Isn't that funny?
All right. And the next item on the agenda was the Alternative Assessment Working Group. So I know there was a document that was sent out in, I believe it was the cancellation to the April DCC meeting. It was just something I had pulled together with updated information from what the Finance Subcommittee of the Regional School Committee had done when we looked at this issue a couple of years ago. I went back, I rehashed all the regional agreements that we had gone through, made sure that they were still current. Where there were new ones added, we added them, and I pulled out all the language that specifically pertains to that calculation. So I know Ronnie has been kind of taking the lead on this, so I will turn this one over to
Yep.
you.
Thank you, Narissa. So I know that we've been talking about this for quite a while. Even this predates even my being on a selectman, so I'm sure it's been going on for many years. And I think at this point, instead of talking, it's time to start to get to work to figure this out. So I know Narissa and I were emailing back and forth. She emailed this out. I've read over it. It makes a lot of sense. I think this is a great starting off point. So I had emailed everyone out to try to get names from each town because we've heard loud and clear from the school committee that this isn't a school committee issue. This is a selectmen's issue. We need to take this on. We need to get this done. So I had asked each town to give me representatives that would be on this work group. I have yet to hear back from people. I think you kind of said, Joe, in a meeting that you would probably be on it, so.
I am.
Awesome. So I will write down Joe on it. So Joe, if you could get one other person. I don't know, Larry, if you want to be, so just Joe and Larry.
He was voted Tuesday night.
Perfect, perfect. So Joe and Larry, and then we still
It's the
haven't heard from
excitement.
Newbury.
Energy.
So
That's what
I
you
don't
get.
know.
That's what you get.
I know
Duly noted.
months ago, Alicia had mentioned that she felt as though she would be on it, but no one had responded to my 2 emails that I sent out. So I think our next step is to, instead of just continuing to email and not hear from anyone, to set an actual date, and this is when we're going to be meeting. So Joe, if we can, Joe and Larry, if at least we can, because Freeman actually volunteered, so I forgot to mention that Freeman is actually, so Freeman is also.
But look at the energy and the
But yes,
enthusiasm
yes.
still.
So be Freeman and myself from Salisbury, Joe and Larry from Raleigh, and then we'll still need to hear from.
I can clarify, I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, but I did get an email from Mary Ellen Jameson, including J.R. Colby, who is the chair, and CC to Tracy Blaze as well. And I had a couple back and forths just clarifying, because there was an email from, it was 2017, I remember the date, in 2017, that basically said the selectmen had a discussion, and they were not interested in engaging in the discussion at this time. So that was forwarded again, and then I replied and said, okay, so I'm just clarifying, so this is fresh, still the opinion, and JR did confirm that at this point, they are not interested in having the discussion. So I would certainly support my recommendation, and again, I've said this around the table a couple times, if you look at the Cape Cod Times and Dennis Yarmouth having this exact same discussion, you could literally insert our towns, and they're just a 2-town region, so they're moving ahead with just 1 town, redrafting and trying to gain some momentum. So I would suggest and say, absolutely, if the 2 towns are interested, let's do some work. Let's do some work and get creative, and hopefully we can engage Newbury with some really interesting and creative solution that really works for everyone.
Ryan, did they say why they're not interested?
I would really love to not speak on behalf of the selectmen. Generally, the sentiment is, at this point in time, and I don't think it's different than anything they've said before. And I think if we go back in history and go back in 5-year chunks in history and increments, and there's always 1 town who is doing the best as far as the assessments. Obviously, this year was
A little equal, a little bit more
equal. I mean, and thank God, can I just say? Exactly. So yes. So my understanding is nothing has changed.
So I think the next step then is for us to come up with a date to go forward. I think using what Narissa has pulled together is a great starting point, and then kind of figuring out where we want to go from there. So I guess my question to you, Narissa, is I know that this is led by us, and I can take that on and have absolutely no problem chairing that. Will there be any school committee members that would be participating in at least the discussion?
Yep, we haven't had the conversation, but I know last year when we were talking about it, I said, since I had done all the research and had been through these, that I was absolutely happy to support. As you said, I do see this as being between the towns. I mean, the school committee is definitely affected by this, but this is not our business to a large extent. And last year, I was almost feeling like I'd overstepped, even pushing it as far as I had, but I feel like we look at those facts and figures every day and know them inside and out, and this was clearly something that was affecting kind of all around what was happening. So I felt like we needed to bring that forward. So I'm happy to sit on it. I don't know if anyone else has interest this year. I'm seeing a lot of blank faces, so I will say no.
I actually don't think it's appropriate for school committee to be on this. I agree with you, Narissa. It does have to be between the towns, because that's where our funding comes from. And I would rather have it be as clean as possible, personally speaking. Narissa's done great work on pulling this information together. I think you go from there, and then whatever this group decides, bring it back to this group, and we could provide our input then. That's just my opinion.
So The only issue I have with that is because Narissa knows so much of the history and the background knowledge, so even if it is as an outside kind of consultant, so to speak, somebody that we can kind of ask questions to, because I feel as though you have the background knowledge a little bit more than us. I mean, we know what the, regional agreement is, the history of it, why it's been that way for many years, but just kind of knowing what that looks like. So, and I don't know if there's a way to figure that out, that you would be more the consultant, even just coming and being quiet, and when we have a Narissa question, is a Narissa question. I mean.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm happy to do that, or, I mean, you can proceed as you need to with meetings, and then at the point where you feel like you need me in there, even if you might need me in that meeting, I'm happy to just sit in the back and, kind of answer questions. And I do want to say, I ran out of time because I've had personally a lot going on, but, the underestimation of the century, I think. But I did intend, this document isn't all of the districts that are listed in this document aren't necessarily using this alternative calculation. I did intend to go back and figure out which ones were actually, maybe in the last 5 years, had actually utilized this, because they have that choice even when it's in the regional agreement. They can choose to use it, or they can choose to not use it, just like Brian had explained last year. Just because it's in there doesn't mean that the state method goes away. It's always a choice for us, and it's whether it becomes the primary plan or the fallback plan, it's there, and that's why we need it as an alternate, because we have nothing right now other than the state method. The state method is what the state dictates, and the state method is what's in our regional agreement. So there's no way around that. And what a lot of these districts are doing, in my estimation, is giving themselves another plan, another go-to. And I think that makes sense. It gives you options no matter what you need to do. I don't know how many of them are actually using these currently right now.
For the plan to succeed, so a town like, let's say, Newbury, or it could be, what would be the incentive for them if you did this type of thing? They would probably end up paying more than somebody, so if you wait it out, so I mean, why would if a town is making out because the assessment is working out to their favor, why would they want to join this?
I think that changes every year. I mean, so the reality is.
Changed in the last 2 years. So.
Well, this year, I mean, their assessment, again, so Salisbury's 38%, Bradley 33%, and Newbury 29% in rough figures of the student population. So they're always going to be a slightly lesser chunk, piece of the pie.
2 years, Newbury is.
But this year, the assessment, the enrollment swung by, was it 4 students? It was like Newbury went up 2, Raleigh went down 1, Salisbury. It was literally 3 or 4 changed. It was remarkably static. So for the first time in many years, Newbury's assessment did not go down. So Newbury's assessment, because of that static enrollment, stayed fairly commensurate with that percentage increase. So I would say even this year, again, the budget has taken on a very different path this year, given the challenges that we're trying to figure out how to fund. But there is no, if this year is a correction year, trying to figure out how I'm trying to say this, if this year is a correction year for Newbury and we keep on this trend, then they're going to be roughly, increasing that 29% of the budget, Salisbury that 38% of the budget commensurately. We just don't know from year to year how the enrollment's going to swing. But that swing seems to have stopped swinging, at least for this year. So the reality is, if this takes a year to hammer out and come to a spring meeting next year with some change, they could be in a very different position, and something we come up with could actually be beneficial to everyone. And I think that's the reality, is there's no, the point that Narissa made, and I wanted to make sure was clear, because we didn't kind of set the table here for those watching at home. Our agreement agrees with the state formula. The state formula will never go away. So we always have the option to default if we come up with something creative. And as this document outlines that Narissa created, there's some really creative methods out there. So let's be creative. And we can certainly run scenarios to say, if we did it this way over the past 5 years, what would it have looked like? And I think the most telling would be this year, when we have a year where the enrollments didn't swing, and hopefully they won't continue swinging. That starts to give a nice benchmark of moving forward, how that could impact all 3 towns. So I would say now, more than last year or the previous 4 or 5 years, there's potential to come up with something that brings them back to the table. Absolutely.
I have two comments. One
Can
that
you just grab a mic, Joe? Sorry.
directly to address Peter's comment. It has been a revolving issue, and I don't know whether it's over a period of 15 or more years, but all three towns have had their time where they were getting a reduction in their assessment, and so it has benefited, if you will, all three towns, and I think that if we could work something out and keep it on a level keel, that it will be to the benefit of all three again. The other comment that I would make is, having worked on the landlord-tenant and having worked with Brian and Michelle and with Neil and Tracy, that I think that it is better, I agree with you, that not to have a member of the school committee on that negotiating or on that discussion, and that we did a fairly good job, if I will say so myself. And I think that with Tom's help, that we came up with some wordage that helped straighten it out. And I think we can do the same for this.
Great. I'll just address two other things too that I think were kind of missed in that. And part of that is one of the things we've been at the mercy of in the state calculation is effort reduction. That was at, I think, 75% last year, and it's at 85% this year. So it was a relatively small change compared to what it's been in the past. That definitely had the effect, and that's a place where we're also at the mercy of the state calculation. But to go to Peter's question about, where's the motivation? To me, a big part of it is the quality of the schools. This definitely affects the way that, the apportionment is done between the towns, and that has an effect on the quality of the school system. So when you look at, at what's important to a town, I would hope that would also become part of the conversation. Ronnie, do you want to try to set a tentative date right now? Okay.
Joe just threw down a vote for September.
The 15th, when Joe leaves on his cruise.
Nice, nice.
Meeting on the cruise.
And he has to pay for all of us to be on the cruise too, Larry? There you go.
A Triton Viking River
Joe, you want to throw out some dates? I'm pretty old. I mean, I'm back in town usually by 3:30 every day. Larry, you have your calendar?
Which day?
What are you guys thinking as far as when to get going on this?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So are Michelle and I involved in this? Not looking to join extra meetings, but, I mean, if you need the resources and the information, I didn't know as far as the committee isn't involved, we are involved. In the
hope so.
landlord-tenant working group, Michelle and I were there,
Okay.
pulling the numbers and getting you information, and
Right.
so.
So then it needs to be at a certain time then, right?
I mean, I think we're here all day, every day, all night, so we're probably more flexible.
Summertime, you guys? are
Regular,
here?
yeah,
Okay.
all day, every day.
Joe, Larry, any ideas?
Want it after the June 18th?
June, what?
We want it after June 18th.
Yeah.
So after is that when you guys are doing your town meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. So when is your town meeting? June 19th?
June 18th.
18th, okay. So my last day of school is the 26th, so I'm free after that in the
Yeah,
day.
any other day that week would be.
Okay. Freeman?
Easy.
Yeah.
Tell me.
How about Thursday, the 28th?
That works for me.
Okay, if we do it, I mean, it'd be great to do it at a reasonable time, so why don't we look at 11 a.m., is that fine?
Say afternoon, we have a Pine Grove School Building Committee meeting that night at 4, so anytime before 4 o'clock.
So if we did 11 a.m.?
11 a.m. works? Yeah.
On the June 28th, 11 a.m., will be the alternative assessment first work group meeting.
Where?
We're happy to host, or do you want
Is
to
that
come here,
okay
Larry?
here at Triton? Okay.
Fine.
Okay.
We'll come up with a cool group name at that first meeting.
There you go, yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to address on that item before we move on?
No, that's good.
Okay. So item number 6 is the fiscal year 19 budget. I know that Brian, I believe, do you have copies of the email? Did you all get the email that Brian sent out, I assume? Okay, just with the summary of kind of, no?
I don't have the email. I have a couple different documents. Now I have piles all over the place.
Okay. No big deal. I think everybody has them, so they should have received them, so
So,
I'll let you handle.
yeah, I was going to say, I'm trying to remember, not all town officials are in our database when we send to everyone. So if I didn't send that to you, I'm going to send this document around. So there are 2 things I wanted to clarify. Obviously, we want to hear from the towns about next steps, but 2 things that I wanted to clarify in regards to conversations that I've had with everyone from town managers to town officials to parents to teachers to everyone. There were several comments made about clearly people, and I was talking in the newspaper today, the number of reductions that are assumed in this current budget. So this page, I just want to make sure is clear, walking away from this table, that the number of reductions made in this budget to date is 22.6 FTE. So that's full-time equivalency. And what I think was unclear to some was that as we've gone through iterations of this budget, the cuts we've made in each iteration stick, and then we've added to that. So in you have the sheet in front of you now. In the tentative budget, which was voted on February 14th, there was 1 teacher removed from Newbury Elementary School. That was removed due to attrition. We could reduce the 1 teacher and still have decent class sizes. It was in and around 20, I believe. And the March 14th budget, there was $751,000 that was cut from the tentative to the final. That included 2.6 FTEs at the high school. And again, to confirm, those exact sections are not confirmed yet. I believe it will be science sections, social study sections, perhaps some foreign language sections, perhaps a tech ed section. But that changes, literally is still changing as those course enrollments have just completed. And now they have the task of saying, I have this many requests. I can tell you business. The request for business classes has doubled since last year alone. So there are other sections in some areas that weren't as highly requested, and then we can transfer some FTEs into that department. So that's the discussion that's going on now. But there was 2.6, which is a full-time teacher teaches 5 courses. So that's 5 sections is a full teacher, so 2 full teachers, and then an additional 3 sections. There was also a middle school foreign language teacher removed at the middle school. A 0.5 data specialist who is actually part of the tech staff. That's not an instructional data specialist. That's actually someone working with our data. The massive amounts of data we track and have to track and report to the state. So we cut that position in half. And then we also cut a payroll clerk position in half in our office that wasn't presently filled. So actually what we did was combine those 2 positions, and the person who was the full-time data specialist is now already assumed the dual role. So that worked well because we didn't have to lay anyone off. And she's just as good at the payroll clerk job as she is at the data specialist job. So
Sorry, but the high school, you have a couple of old people couple, I know at least a couple that are retirement, close to retirement age, so wouldn't they be the ones you'd be looking at more or less? If,
There is one retirement included in that 2.6. The other is RIF or non-renewal or reduction. Yep. And then, so to that question,
Yeah, it answered my.
so I have to understand there's FTEs, so there's the position, and then there's the people who fill them. And on any given year, there might be, the next example, in last week's budget, we cut the reading specialist. As a English teacher, reading specialist, she then moves into an English position, and then that starts the series of movement of teachers. So there's the position, and then there's the individuals. So that's, individuals change every year based on need. It's the positions that were removed. So 2.6 was the total reduction. So there was 4.6 teachers reduced, FTEs, total FTEs reduced for the final budget in March. And then last week on the May 16th budget, there was additional 17 FTEs. There was a full-time reading specialist at the high school, 14 instructional assistants, and 2 custodians, which is actually 4 half-time positions. We're taking out a half-time custodian at each site. So in total, there's a reduction of 22.6 FTEs. And then I noted in the box below that, just to make sure that people don't think we're messing with numbers, we did add 2 positions in this budget. Those are required by IEP caseloads. We're not meeting IEP requirements. And so in order to do that, we needed to add a special education teacher at Pine Grove and a special education teacher at Salisbury. So showing the true net change, if you add those 2 FTEs back in, it's a total net FTE reduction of 20.6. And just to clarify, if you look at the 22.6 FTEs reduced, our total personnel roster is about 425, fluctuates, just north or south, which means that's a 5% reduction in our employee workforce. So just to make sure that there wasn't misinformation out there that this budget doesn't include any layoffs, some layoffs, some retirements, but it is a reduction of in the vicinity of 5% of our total workforce. The other thing that I wanted to clarify, sorry, I should have passed this around before I came in, and I can explain this to you as you're listening, and this is just an email from an attorney, which it's an email from an attorney. There were some questions about the amount that gets voted on by the towns for our budget. And so this is actually, I've had several discussions with Neil this past week. By statute, and you can see Felicia Vasudevan, who many of you probably have met, Ginny Tate, who was Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane, she retired. And so we have a team of Mike Maccaro, who you see CC'd on here as well, and Felicia Vasudevan, who provide advice for us. But she references Chapter 71, 16B, as well as Chapter 71, Section 34, and then on down to 603 CMR 41.052A. And just so you clear, CMR's Code of Mass Regulation, so that is the Department of Ed 603 code. So these are regulations interpreting the laws, specifically 7116B and 7134. Again, not going to read it to you, but as in her interpretation and in speaking with any other regions around the state and the Department of Ed, the reason our treasurer certifies the amount to the member towns is because that is the sole authority that the school committee has. The school committee doesn't have the ability to fund, decide how to fund, suggest how to fund the budget. Their sole authority is developing the budget and submitting it to the towns. The towns then have to put before their appropriating body, which I don't think I realized, it's like 71% of the state is town meeting form. So in a town meeting form of government, it's not the town manager, it's not the selectman, it's the the town meeting, whether town annual or special, and vote on that figure. So I don't think there's a lot of unclarity, but just I heard some in conversations and wanted to make sure this is my understanding, Department of Ed's understanding, clearly our attorney's understanding, and I had her research this again just to confirm. As she said up at the top, there are no cases where this has been tested yet. which is always helpful when you've got case law to back up statute. But just to confirm that the number, the committee certifies a number to the towns then act upon that number at a town meeting. If the town doesn't, and again, initially, this is round 2, so in round 2, if the town doesn't take an action on that number, it's a default affirmative vote. If they take an action on the number and hold the town meeting with that amount on the warrant, then it's the will of the voters. So, again, that's not, I believe everyone around this table understands that. I just wanted to make sure that was clear because I've heard a lot of, certainly there's a lot of people who are wading these waters as we are, figuring out how to do this. So there's been a lot of confusion in trying to keep people updated with accurate information.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm just going to say, I know there are a lot of strong opinions about this out there. I just ask for respect as we kind of have this discussion, and if we need to take a break for 5 minutes and walk away and come back, let's do that. See, Freeman's ready to take a break right now, I think. He's like, can we just get done? So I know the school committee has already discussed this at length. I know some of you were at that meeting. I'd like to kind of put it out to the towns first and see, I know a lot of the meetings were televised. I was at Raleigh's Board of Selectmen meeting. I know Linda was at Salisbury Board of Selectmen meeting. So if we could just get kind of a rehash of where you're at, I would appreciate that. Joe, do you want to start?
Monday night, we voted to amend our budget, and we will not be putting in an override to challenge the in any way on the school budget. As far as I'm concerned, that vote accepts the Triton assessment as we received it from this past date. I've forgotten.
Yeah. Last week.
Yeah.
Last week.
So, we will be having a special town meeting. We have to approve taking some money out of free cash. We're funding the 300 and, what is it, 314?
314.
$314,000, and so we're not taking all of that out of the free cash, but we have to take any money out of free cash, we have to have a special town meeting, and we will have it to do that. And we're making other adjustments to the budget that was passed on the 30th, so that we will again have a balanced budget. But as far as the Triton assessment goes, that we will be joining Newbury as approving the Triton assessment.
Thank you, Joe. Ronnie?
Yep. So during our meeting, we also did not put the override on the agenda, and at this point, we were waiting to see what Rowley did before we went forward to decide what we can and cannot do. So we do have a town meeting that has been scheduled for June 30th, which our charter is a little bit different, where we had to have a 45-day notice, which confused people and pushed, why are you having it on July 4th week in a holiday weekend, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the questioning why we were having the town meeting. So we will wait to see what happens in Rowley, and then at that point, it's the two of the three have passed it. So we'll figure out from there where we go.
Okay. So my understanding, Joe, just to confirm based on what Ronnie just said, the budget itself will not be on your town meeting, right?
Will not.
It's strictly the funding mechanism. So you're
That's
basically,
correct.
okay, thank you. So I think that's probably the answer that you're looking for. All right. I don't know if anyone else wants to make any other comments on that, but I will, otherwise we'll close it up.
Are you concerned about getting a quorum if you have a town meeting right before
I have faith that the Salisbury PTA will get people in there to have a quorum. But again, at this point, we need to decide whether or not it's even, there's a point to have a town meeting, because if Raleigh passes it, then there's not.
Right.
There's no point, so we may not even have that town meeting.
Okay. I just wanted to wrap up with just a quick note, since I am, oh, I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
I'd like to, again, I've been working closely with the Raleigh PTA, and they've provided a lot of support for the police fire station override, for the Pine Grove override, and they've been very, very helpful, and I hope we can get their support to have a quorum on the 18th of June for this special town meeting.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to wrap up quick at the end and just talk about the DCC itself for a second. So I see this as a mechanism to get everything that needs to be talked about in front of all three towns and the school committee. I am happy to be a resource as the chair of the school committee. When you need me, call me, email me, but I would hope that any decisions, ongoing discussion, things like that will be brought here. If you have something you want to talk about, please, put it in. Let's get it on the agenda as we have these. I'm hoping to continue to have these, not necessarily monthly through the summer, but definitely as we get back into the school year. I know the summer's tough for everyone. I hope that that's agreeable to the towns to continue to go monthly. Okay.
Yeah, I recommend October 1st out.
You are focused on this cruise. We can have the whole DCC there.
That shows up, so, well, I shouldn't say that, Larry. Come.
If I can ask a question or two. Last year, we had the whole year in advance, which was very helpful because I put it in my calendar so that I don't miss these.
Yes.
So hopefully other people will put it in their calendar so they don't miss this, but if that, I know is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe we have, did you do a
So the school
draft?
committee,
Oh, we did.
did you do that in May? You did that in May,
Yes,
that's not
we
in
did.
June. So you can certainly set those at the June meeting.
Okay.
And I think it sounds like we've done Thursday seems to be the best night. It seems like everyone's got Selectmen Monday, Tuesdays, committee stuff tends to be Wednesdays. So if it's Thursdays, we'll continue with whatever we're on, the third Thursday of the month, and just kind of chart it out. Is it third Thursday? It's the 23rd. It's actually the fourth Thursday, isn't it? So we'll just map it out that way and put them September through, we don't have one in June. I think that's been the will of the group, is that whatever's done in May, we'll call that done, and then hopefully not be in school until the 26th again next year. But that seems to be, if that works, we can have you formally vote that at the June meeting and take it from there.
Does the 6:30 time work best for everyone? Is that a time we should keep? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. All right, excellent. Well, I am going to officially adjourn us, and thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate it.